Good evening, gamers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Games with Dave. Tonight, I am excited to be joined by Goodman Games designer and I believe head of marketing as well, correct?
Sure. Let's
Okay,
go with
well,
that.
we're going with that. I thought I had read that somewhere doing my
Yeah,
doing my research.
it's a yes, that's totally fine. Yes, totally
Okay.
fine.
but uh
Marketing, y'all.
but I'm joined by Brendan LaSalle. Brendan has designed awesome adventures such as Hole in the Sky, Neon Knights, and he is also the mind behind the upcoming XCrawl Classics that's coming later this year, I believe, correct?
Yep.
All
Not
right.
not even too much later,
Nice.
hopefully.
Yeah, I saw it's in layout now, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
totally
absolutely is.
awesome. I cannot wait to get my
Me
hands
either.
on that.
Dave, thank you so much for having me on your show, man.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad we could make this all work out. And yeah, I'm super excited. So how old were you when you first got into like RPG games, and what were some of the first games that you played? I'm sure D&D, given our age,
Absolutely.
is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I actually started in 77. We were living in New York and my family went on vacation to California, and we visited with some of my mom's friends who were there for a year on sabbatical. And their son Tommy had he had, as I recall, the Blue Holmes edition.
Okay.
So he was the first, like that was our first, like, introduction into everything. So we played, like, we played exactly as you would imagine two 7-year olds who are self-taught would play. You know what I mean? It was ridiculous, but it was a lot of fun. The intro he actually set me up with to this day was one of those mind-blowing things I've ever experienced. Like, my intro to the game as a character was like, what the what? Like, you know, and then I went back. Then I didn't play for very long after that. Like, I came home with like the spell of the game wrapped around my head, and I would sit and draw characters and draw, dungeony things. But it wasn't until a few years later. I met some kids in the neighborhood that played, and joined Boy Scouts. My Boy Scout troop all played. So in the beginning, it was a lot of AD&D, and then Gamma World. We played the Doctor Who role playing game a little bit, and then this one
Nice.
called Mercs was big. And then I ran the first game I ever ran was FGU's Villains and Vigilantes,
Oh,
which was
nice.
yeah, still holds a special place in my heart. So loved that game. I've played it forever. And then when I went off to college, years and years and years later, V&V was the only game I brought because it was just one book and dice. You know what I mean? So I could just, like, literally put it in my backpack, and you didn't have to worry about bringing like 15 D&D books and all everything. So
I know nowadays it seems like with some games you need like a hand truck to bring some of the books with you. You
you
know?
know.
So you started out playing, and what was it that really lit the spark, so to speak, for you to become a game designer?
Well, I think that anybody who designs their own adventures and settings and scenario, you have that spark. It's just a matter of how far do you want to take it? Do you want to just create something that's going to just be for your friends and your buddies, or do you want to actually keep going until it's like uh until you've actually created a thing that you can actually sell and market. And I created, when I was a kid, we used to write role-playing games, me and my friends, but they were just very silly, and like it was literally just for us. First
Yep.
one I ever did was the Dawn of the Living Dead role-playing game
Oh,
that me
nice.
and my buddies made up in about 83. And it was all based on our love of George Romero movies and zombie apocalypse type stuff. And it was, I mean, you the one mechanic that I really remember was that you had different hit points for every part of your body. So like you
Hmm.
had like arm hit points, leg hit points, torso, head, foot, hand, and then blood points. So if you lost like 2 points from hit points from your hand, you also lost 2 blood points. And that was what was likely to overall kill you. You know what I mean? Eventually.
That sounds
Um,
pretty intense.
it was. I mean, it was, two 13-year-olds who weren't afraid of, God or man coming up with this crazy thing. And like we were so into horror movies, it really was very gory. It was really sort of based on our on our horror movie, but like that was we watched so much horror movies back then. This was this was my buddy Michael Dion was the first person I knew to have a VCR machine. You know what I mean? An actual, he had a VCR. So we would go and we would rent these like things now that are just like, I remember we rented The Deadly Spawn, and his mom came in to check on us while we were watching this in the living room, and she was like mad. We would watch something that was that nasty. You know what I mean? Like
Uh,
we got a bit of a talking to, but I did, I worked on that with them and other games and things we would put together for ourselves and other scenarios for Dungeons and Dragons. But eventually, I got the idea for XCrawl, and I ran it for my friends, and it was very different. You could see, like, this would have been, say, 2000 in when I was living in Seattle, and like my friends reacted very, very differently to XCrawl. You know what I mean? It was like night and day. And like, I ran the first dungeon, and then afterwards, I had another idea I wanted to do. I had this idea for a Shaolin versus Wu Tang game,
oh, nice.
and I started describing it to them, and they're like, "No, no, we're going to play more XCrawl because you're going to write another dungeon, and we're going to keep going." I was like, "Okay." And it was like, huh. So that was when, like, I at that point I kind of realized, all right, you've got something here that's different. So when I moved back to Georgia, I approached Panda Head Productions and pitched it to them, and you know, they were with it. It was one of those things, like I ran it like a demo game for them. They enjoyed it, and like they got in touch with me like a day and like 2 days later or so, and they were like, "Yes, we're gonna do it." And I was like, "Hooray, that's great!" And they're like, "And can you do us 90,000 words?" And in about 6 weeks, it was like,
Whoa.
yeah. But I had no job. I was literally living in my mom's basement at the time, and I just jammed on it for for all that time and knocked it out. So there were a lot of 12-hour days on the early days of XCrawl.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Now, are those original XCrawl modules and rules still available in print, or?
Some of them you can. It's very hard to find the old the XCrawl Color Edition or the XCrawl, like the XCrawl Color Edition you can still find, but you can't. What happened was, when there came a point when third party stuff, you couldn't put it on the shelf if it had that D20 logo on it anymore. I wish I had a copy here, and I would show it to you. But there was that, if it had that logo, you couldn't sell it at a retailer any longer. So at that point, they all got pulled. Some got sold on eBay, but most of them perished in a flood in my mom's basement much later
Oh,
on. I know, right?
that's so
So you can
sad.
still find, it is sad. You can still find some of them. The rarest one, we did an XCrawl screen that had a mini adventure in there, the Celebrity Pro Am crawl, which was Allison Brooks's idea. And the idea is that, like, it's a celebrity thing, so you can either play it as a bunch of regular crawlers who have been embedded with a single celebrity who's a nitwit and who gets you into all kinds of trouble, or you could all play celebrities, and either way, it gets very interesting very quickly.
Nice, nice. Um, so what is your favorite new mechanic, I guess would be the way to ask it, that you're introducing in XCrawl Classics?
Well, so when I got the okay to write XCrawl Classics, there were some things I had to do, and one of them was it had to be completely compatible with Dungeon Crawl Classics. So, really, the only new mechanic I've added is the Mojo pool. So the mojo was a factor in XCrawl since the beginning. And the idea is that, like, the mojo represents the power of teamwork that you can use to, like, bump your friends up, and it's the basically it's a system of bonuses, but it represents teamwork in that you have these points that you can't use for yourself. You can only use them when you want to aid your allies. So you would say these points, there was a point of pools the table would share, and they could say, oh, well, you're making doing a thing. This is really dangerous, really important, really crucial. Take some points out of the pool, and and we'll work it out or whatever. So I was working on how to translate that into Dungeon Crawl Classics. I was really going to do almost the exact same system because it worked fine, you know. And then I played Michael Curtis's Lankmar game, and as it turns out, the way that Fleeting Luck worked was like, oh, perfect. Like I was like, oh, like, I had to write put my hat in my hand while writing an email. Dear Michael, I'd really like to borrow the bulk of this mechanic for XCrawl. So I'm really excited about it, but there's not really a lot of like, really it's a setting. There are new character classes, there are new rules. Some of the character classes I think have some neat stuff that'll be fun for for longtime players. There's a grappling class, where you really play like a Greco-Roman style wrestler, which is a lot of fun.
Nice.
But really, the only new mechanic is, like I said, is Mojo, and those who have played Lankbar will find it very familiar. But it's best of breed. There was no reason not to use it when it was already there. And Mike was very cool about it. And I'm still paying him in installments. Like I got to send him a check every. So
That's great. So is there anything in the transition from XCrawl to XCrawl Classics that you had to cut that you wish you could have kept?
yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of so it was always built on the 3.5, 3.0, then Pathfinder chassis. So, like as freeing as it is to get rid of feats, the Pathfinder edition had a second of its own separate thing, which was fame feats. So this is what I learned. If you gave people, you can't give people I don't know if you ever played Pathfinder, but in Pathfinder,
I have not.
every time as you level up, you can get these feats. There's all kinds of things for them. You can get feats that will increase your saving throw, feats that will give you, more of an attack chance with this weapon or that weapon. Yeah, every maneuver was an individual feat. So if you wanted to be able to effectively disarm, you had to get improved disarm. Sweetie, sorry, all three. They love Daddy Talks the Lightbox Hour, so they're all in here like looking at me like, "What's he doing?" Now they're fighting. I there were some things that you could do with feats that like I really liked. You know what I mean? So like for example, you could spend 2 fame feats and get an entourage. You know what I mean? So so the thing is, you can still do it organically in XCrawl. You know what I mean? It's like, in fact, or rather in XCrawl Classics, it's the kind of thing that you could actually make into a quest, so to speak. Like, I want to have an entourage, so you might have to like go across the country, find all your old homies from back when, people you trust and who knew you before you got famous, that you can, won't sell you out to the tabloids and be like, look, I need you to come and do a thing for me. And,
but it was back together.
Get the band back together, So I would say that was one thing. And the other would be like, so it was very freeing in one way, in that I'm no longer restricted to a monster manual. I can, or you know what I mean? I can just like all the monsters in XCrawl, they're all basically made up from scratch. But I do miss writing these parody things for the old timey monsters to do. For example, the Brooklyn Crawl, it's got a Medusa in there. So everyone, when you say Medusa, everyone knows Medusa, turn you to stone with a look. So in that adventure in particular, my Medusa is in a Medusa ball. Okay, this huge, big, round thing that she can kind of move around on the inside, like sort of like, so she can chase you around this dungeon. So she can still look at you through it. It's clear. So she can look at you through it and turn you to stone, but you can't easily hit her with a weapon, So it's a lot of it. I would say it's mostly just trade-offs, But I will say that using the Dungeon Crawl Classics system is more fun. It is faster. It is more cinematic, which really appeals to me both as a GM and as a player and as a designer, frankly. And it's more of a roller coaster. You could really you could really predict an encounter in any of those very rigid games, Pathfinder, 3.0, 3.5, just by knowing what you were up against and what you had, what character classes you had to rate and what magic items you had. You could be like, all right, well, here's what's going to happen here. And there were dice rolls and, crits could happen, things could happen, but it's way more challenging to predict what's going to happen from game to game now. And playtesting is way more important than it used to be, because you really have to play an adventure several times before you get an idea of how crazy it's going to get on any end. You still can't ever fully predict anything that's going to be built on the DCC engine,
No.
because it's just such a roller coaster, which I love.
It is. So that's one of the things I love about it, is how bonkers the game can get.
Oh,
And it's like,
right.
and that's one of the things I fell in love with when I first found it. I'm just like I remember cracking open the DCC book when I first found it, and I'm like, this is me right here. And it was just like, I'm like, this is perfect. And under my arm it went, and has stayed with me. If you could see the shelf behind me, I have several like 2-tiered shelves throughout my home, and the whole shelf back there is filled with DCC stuff. I absolutely love it.
It's very wise that you've hidden it with a screen to prevent heists. You know what I'm saying? There's a window right there, and me and my buddies, we could be in and out of there. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be hanging off the ceiling on a rope, but you wouldn't even know I was. No, that's awesome. Yeah, it's so the things that I did, leave behind in earlier editions are all replaced by awesomeness, But it's a lot of it is your attachment to it. I think a lot of times for me, like doing the new version, I really wanted to make it where you could really still play the same kinds of adventures basically as you could, back in the old days. But it also needed its whole own spell system, all of the DCC spells of cleric and wizard and elf are way too cosmic for typical dungeon crawl classic arena play.
Right.
The example I always use is sleep. You know what I mean? A maximum level sleep spell in the world of XCrawl, if you were in any kind of an urban center, would kill thousands. You know what I mean? People in traffic on the freeway. You know what I mean? Airplanes. You know what I mean?
It would be like one of those like post-apocalyptic movies where you see the airplane spiraling out of the sky.
Yeah, it'd be absolutely out of control. And that's no fun. And you know what? When you do that kind of thing, you lose sponsors. People change the channel, and then what are you doing?
Yeah, you're out of a
So
job.
that wouldn't work for XCrawl. So the spells in XCrawl, so it does have its own it's all its own new spells for it's got blaster spells. So blasters are our main arcane spellcaster, and gnome spells. We have gnomes. And their spells are more fey magic, you know what I'm saying? Glamour and illusion and that kind of thing. So all the spells in DCC are significantly less powerful than any counterpart you could point to in Dungeon Crawl Classics, but they're, for the most part, they're more tactical. A lot of them are like toolkit type spells that you can do a lot of things with. They never hit that god tier of like, hey, I'll shoot a magic missile, and if this fool's 100 miles away, I can still do it because I got a piece of his hat or whatever. And, you know what I mean? And just that's like Cincinnati to to the Beltway or whatever. You know what I mean? Just So it never gets like that, but it will get to where there's a smart bomb spell that you can cast. That, like, if you roll high enough, you could actually make it wait and hover over somebody and be like, all right, you surrender right now, or I'm blowing the whole room to bits. You know what I mean?
Man, that's fantastic.
You could drop it on yourself and be like, all right, smart bomb, get everybody except me, the wizard, the thief, the cleric, and the referee.
Awesome.
So
I can't wait for that and to get to play with the spell phones.
Spell phones. Yeah, they were a late addition. That was actually like that was that was like a late thing we brought to it, but it was like once it came up, I was like, oh, spell phones, we have to do that. So one of the new adventures that's coming out for next year, it's got a spell phone puzzle. I'm really excited to see how people do with. So.
Oh, nice. I can't wait to see it. So how complex was the conversion from XCrawl to XCC, and what kind of impact did the dice chain have on the conversion?
That is an excellent question. So I would say that the conversion, on the one hand, it wasn't complex at all, because I had to start from the ground up and recreate all the character
Oh,
classes.
okay.
Like once you're locked into that though, it's like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, well, so there was never like any like, tinkering, how do I make this ability work with this kind of thing? These classes recognizably work like the DCC classes, and like they all have their own mechanics and their own things. But I didn't invent like any new super weirdness for them. It's more like I'm a tinkerer with systems, so I more like reconfigure things, you know. So sorry, man.
You,
Oh, I'm good. I'm
you
good.
good? You sure?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I would like to point out to today's viewers that I am just getting over a real intense 3-day gastric episode. I'm on the tail end, I'm on the mend, but there you go. Um, wow. Anyway, I started with I had the world in place. I had the gods I wanted to use, but I had to redo them because now, the gods of DCC are nothing like the gods of how they work, systemically in, Pathfinder or other things. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Think about like Pathfinder. I don't even remember what you used to call it, but you would pick aspects, I think they were. So like if you were Apollo, you might choose healing and art, or you might choose chaos and good, or whatever the other ones are. I don't remember how it works anymore. So I had all of that to start off with. So in some cases, the most important thing was keeping the feel of it, So once I realized I had to scrap everything,
Oh,
it was very easy. That's the decision. It's like, oh, okay. You have a moment of going, ah. I sure did work on this Pathfinder edition a long time for a game that only was in stores for 18 months. But you know what though? C'est la vie, and so it was a very big change. And then dice chain, the dice chain, it was a huge consideration. But I had been playing a lot of DCC by the time it was time to pull that over. I had really already been experimenting with dice chain, so it was just a matter of like I got it. You know what I mean? From a
yep.
player and from a GM aspect, judge aspect. So for me, it was just sort of like figuring out, well, how does this work? Really, it's all kind of spelled out for you in the DCC rules, but it lets you do, I have like, for example, like so this is a conversion I did. Okay, so I want to create my brawler. In the old games, in the Pathfinder version, the brawler had a combat pool where you have like at third level, I think his combat pool was 6. So 6 points that he can move between his attack bonus, damage bonus, with maybe fortitude saves, and one other thing that I can't recall. So that you can kind of shift it around. So the idea was, how do I still create a generalist like that? You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that's. So I didn't even try to recreate the mechanics. I just wanted to get the feel of it. Once there came a point where I realized all the mechanics that I had been working with in Pathfinder 3.0, 3.5 had to go, and then it was just like, well, what's left, So.
Well, I'm glad it was that easy. It had to, I imagine it was, like you said, it's kind of hard to
I
let it
mean,
go and be
it
like,
took
all
me,
that work.
yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was delightfully, delightfully pleasant. You know what I'm saying? Like, the chance to like, like the chance to really put that much time into a creative endeavor where you are working with a thing that you created, you're working within a world that you've come up with rules for. I mean, that is a pleasure. I can't even tell you how much fun it was. I used to sit and like, like I had so much fun like envisioning the spells, like there were some spells, there were XCrawl spells that had showed up in earlier editions. So some of them I just had to adapt, you know what I mean? So like for example, this is a really good example of how die chain works and how spells work differently in DCC and in Pathfinder. So in the 3.5 rules, okay, 3.0 rules actually, there were 4 spells. It was like weave raiment, weave armor, weave weapon, and I forget what the 4th weave spell was, but it was decent, Essentially, you can make a short-term object that you would have in your hand. So at first level, weave raiment. You can make yourself a really cool outfit and then go into a thing. It could be a disguise or for whatever reason you wanted to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
At second level, it was weave weapon. And if your warrior lost their weapon in a thing, boom, hit him with a weave weapon, and now he's got a battle axe that'll last him for 1 hour per caster level or what it happened to be. and on up, So for the conversion, I made all of those spells into weave. And now, it's weave. So on a low roll, you have the ability to make clothes. Slightly higher roll, you can still make an outfit, but you can also make a weapon. And then, higher still, you can now make armor or
Nice.
a weapon that'll last a long time, or clothes that'll last a very, very long time. And then, weave bonds was the last one. So that the highest level, you can like zap somebody with like, you weave out of the air perfect like shackles to like, manacle them up.
Nice.
So at high enough levels, it can be an attack spell that you can use to like subdue a foe, instantly, and at really high levels, it's like it'll even work on like slimes or ghosts, you know what I mean?
Wow.
Like that's the highest level. You can chain a ghost up, you know what I mean? And he's just chained up ghost, and then I guess you can interrogate him, and I don't know.
Let's
Ask him
see who's under this mask.
Yeah. Old man McGillicuddy.
Yeah.
No, he'd be a real ghost. It's XCrawl, My question would be, but do you really know Elvis? That's what I want to know, sir. So in that case, it was just like taking all 4 of those original spells and just making them into one big spell.
Awesome.
That was cool. Yeah, that was a delightful Saturday. I was putting that together, the first draft of that, But then in some cases, I just needed substitute spells. You know what I mean? Like, what do I have instead of bada? I'm trying to think of an example, like Featherfall. Featherfall is a key spell for wizards. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There's no other spell that does a thing like that. So I have a spell that at higher levels can mimic the usage of Featherfall. You can still you roll a certain amount, you can stop yourself from falling. If you roll a certain other amount, you can stop somebody else from falling. But on a low roll, you can just hover. You can just use it to like hover around the battlefield and avoid spikes and things in the ground and pits and whatnot. So
pretty cool. I dig it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, thank you. That was a labor of love, and like I had many a glorious night just sitting with my notebook, like coming up with ideas for how to replace like spells with other things and how to make them really XCrawl feeling.
Yep.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
oh, go ahead. Sorry, I thought
no, just the kind of experience
with the dice chain. Like, I think my favorite thing to do is build tables.
Sure.
Like you can have a D24 table, a D30 table,
Oh, yeah.
Not that you couldn't do it anyway, but it's so much more fun to be able to pick up the D30 and just roll it.
Absolutely. I'll tell you one thing I did, and this was really a shout out to Jeff Goad. So we've got our own Mercurial magic table for blasters, right? Now, so when you roll your Mercurial magic up, you're going to roll your check, and then you're going to add your luck modifier times 10.
Right.
So if you have +1 luck, you're plus 10% on this. If you have a -1 luck, you're minus 10 on this, okay? Which means that the true range for your Mercurial magic should be from -129 all the way up to 130. And Jeff was saying, I don't want a gap in the middle that spell works as normally. I want all weird stuff. I was like, all right. So, my nod to Jeff Goad, one of my gaming homies from way back, the XCrawl Mercurial table, again, with these great tables in there, goes from -29 to +130. And
Nice.
I don't remember what +130 is because it's never came up in play testing. You would have to literally be a wizard with an 18 luck and then roll 00. It just never came up.
The odds are so.
Yeah, but if you have the opposite though, -29, it's death spell. The first time you try to cast a spell, you get an automatic 20 on your check, but you die spectacularly 1 round later.
It's kind of like a time bomb almost of like,
yeah,
this is really fun. Boom. And
for a certain play style though, that would be somebody's funnest day. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you mad now? Pull my finger. I dare you.
Oh, that's great.
So another weird thing to adapt that I had to come up with entirely were patrons. So patrons that's a DCC as far as I know. XCrawl is really the only game with patrons and such. We didn't have them, so coming up with new patrons and giving them spells and everything, that was a lot of fun. But that was something I had to come up with out of nothing because I didn't have patrons.
Nice. What was your favorite one to design, if you can say at the moment?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So okay, so my favorite one to design of the new patrons is the Amazing Rando. So the Amazing Rando, he was the first wizard to ever die in XCrawl. So the opening day of the first thing, tried to cast a spell, blew himself up. He's in trouble, and now he's just like, he becomes a spirit out in the ether. And then on opening day, all of the wizards would pour one out to him,
Yep.
and like that little bit of energy like brought him back to our universe, and he reached out to people. They were like, look, do this, and get this book and this artifact. And eventually they brought him back to our universe from the realm of the dead, and he was able to eventually become a patron. So now he's like the XCrawl patron. You know what I mean? And thinking about what that would look like was really fun for me. Like what would be a guy who really is all about it? You know what I mean? Like what would be the most important stuff for him? So I really had a blast working on The Amazing Rando. And his name is a MST3K reference, and a rare one. So I had fun looking for that. So that was a lot of fun for me.
Now you're going to make me go through all the old episodes of MST3K.
Good luck. Good luck, guys. If you find it, you got luck points coming. I'm telling you.
Excellent. So we'll shift gears a little bit. Thus far, what has been your favorite thing about working at Goodman Games, if you can really narrow it down to a favorite thing?
Absolutely. So I did a lot of freelancing before I came to Goodman Games. And the honest truth is, Joseph Goodman is the best boss in the gaming business that I've ever encountered. He takes good care of us. He attracts good people to himself. So everybody I work with is cool. Like I don't have any, you know what I mean? Like, this is like everybody I work with, I'm fond of, you know what I'm saying? Like
I've got to deal with George today.
I know, right? And like every other job, there was a George. And
sorry to all the Georges out there. We don't mean to single you out.
That was just a random name we chose. George Simpson, you were cool. I like working with you at Rays on the River. Hope you're doing well. We gamed a couple times.
Nice.
Simpson? I think it was Simpson. Anyway, he's a hell of a cook. But no, Goodman Games, I was just working with them. Great people. And on something I really believe in. I believe in role-playing games. I believe in the power of role-playing games to create these wonderful friendships that will last your entire life. I think it can be a very healing thing. I think role-playing games allow people to, work through things that might be very challenging to them. It allows them to sort of step into someone else's shoes. It increases your empathy and your creativity and your strategic thinking, for goodness sakes. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And sure, it's going to wreck some TV shows and movies for you, because you're like, really? You're going to let this guy go off by himself to use the bathroom during a zombie apocalypse?
What kind
Never
of
split the party. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? It'll definitely ruin some stuff. But I think in general, I think it's just, I believe in games, and I really believe in Dungeon Crawl Classics. And, I love the kinds of things that we're being able to work with. I cannot believe that I have a Lankmar adventure that's out there. I mean, that's like, you know what I mean? Like, that's like mind-blowing to me.
To actually get to play in Fritz Leiber's sandbox has got to be the coolest thing in the world.
It was the hardest thing for me. That was the hardest thing, because it was like, to me, Leiber, like the Lankmar and Farfar and the Grey Mouser, that to me, that is, as far as a geek touchstone, that is higher than Star Wars, Star Trek, and any, Lord of the Rings. Like, to me, that was the penultimate. When I was a kid, Dungeons and Dragons led me to first read the Lankmar stories, because I would read in Deities and Demigods about how awesome Farfar and the Grey Mouser were and just drool over what their adventures might be like. And that just sucked me in. And to me, like the Lankmar and that whole world, that's what gaming feels like in a fantasy world. Like, that's like, I love that kind of stuff. And I froze up when they first asked me to work on it. I was like, I was like, you know what I mean? I felt like I would take a step and ruin things. Like I would make a mistake. You know what I mean? So it was a psychological barrier I had to get past to work on Lankmar stuff.
Yeah, well, I imagine it's something that you're so fond of. You would be terrified of breaking something, so to speak. That
absolutely, or just doing it. Doing it any kind of a mischief.
Right.
I was so grateful that I got to. By the time we did Lankmar, I had Michael Curtis, take a look at. Michael Curtis, no one gets that world better than him. And like I included elements and he would be like, that's not very much Lankmar, change that, a little bit. And it would be like, oh my God, he was totally right. Like once you saw it,
Right.
you couldn't unsee it. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So
Yep.
I'm so grateful I got to work with somebody like a real, we're all designers. I work with a team of heavy hitting designers. Mike's a scholar and an archivist and on a level that I'm just not. I never could be. My brain doesn't work that way.
No.
So I remember him at one point being like, this one NPC's name throws you off. That doesn't sound like Lankmar at all. And it was like, yeah, it sure doesn't. So I had to go back, read some more stories and like come up with a better name for it.
As soon as we said Lankmar, the first story that popped into my head, I think is it the Black Coast where they go out on the boat?
Yeah.
And I love that
Just
story.
that takes over them and such. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yep. Such a good tale.
Oh yeah, there's kind of like two levels of the Lankmar stories, and there is the rooftop chases across the city trying to avoid the Thieves Guild or whatever, and then there is the cosmic level stuff like that I just adore. And I love the one had to have the other. You know what I mean? Like those cosmic stories would seem phony if we hadn't also seen these guys in bar brawls and just you know what I mean, like random tavern stuff. That's like oh.
No, Leiber created the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup of fantasy writing.
Yeah.
With taking those two themes and just boom, interlocking them. It's the only way I can think of to describe
No, that's really well said. Yeah, the power of it comes in the juxtaposition between their highest level things and their low level things. He put the peanut butter into the chocolate.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is true. And that's what any kind of good RPG, especially DCC is, where sometimes it's like, you're in a brawl and you get your ear cut off and you bite somebody's lip, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, and sometimes you go through portals and you pass through into the courts of chaos and have to like become involved in the schemes of these cosmic beings that can crush you in a moment. But if you act right, they'll can use you as a cat's paw, and that will extend your existence. I mean, that's the coolest right there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
All of that comes from Leiber, I think, in my humble opinion.
Oh, it's impossible to disagree. So I don't think you're absolutely right. Man, now I'm going to have to do some more reading tonight.
I was just thinking, maybe it's time to do those books again.
So what kind of advice, if there were an aspiring RPG designer sitting there listening to this in 5 years from now, what piece of advice do you feel like you could hand out that would be useful both today and 5 years from now for picking up the pencil or pen, whichever, and going for it?
We're actually getting into it, I would say lean heavily into your own filters. Don't chase the market. That like sometimes you'll like when Game of Thrones first came out, all of a sudden there were all these political fantasy intrigue adventures that all came out kind of right in a row. Now I can't recall any of them. So don't do like that. Don't be like, hey, I want to write one of these things. Get into what create the kind of once you create a fantasy world, it's your fantasy world. You can't help it. You know what I mean? So instead of trying to like handle that with kids' gloves and trying to put your fingerprints into it the least, put your fingerprints into it the most. You know what I mean? Like really, show people something they haven't seen before by sharing all of your internal weirdness. I would really lean into that part of it. I would try not to, when you're learning to write, when you're learning to design, obviously you copy your heroes. You know what I'm saying? You do. I read a good adventure. I read a Harley Stroh thing, and I can't not just narrate my adventure like that, but my life for a little while in that, you know what I mean? With that, beautiful tripping wordplay or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So, but like absorb all of that, but then just, really do your own thing, And I would say that the best thing you can do for the hobby and for yourself is to look for your inspirations outside of fantasy role-playing games, fantasy literature, and fantasy movies and TV. You know what I'm saying? Like, find that inspiration behind them and then bring that into the fantasy realm. You know what I'm saying? I think that um, there are some marvelous kind of clones of a lot of worlds that we really love. And that's very cool,
Yeah.
But like, I feel like most people could do that on their own. If you were a big fan of Rune Lords, say, for example, which I'm remembering a series of my youth, like, it wouldn't be that hard to kind of create that, using an existing game chassis that you played. You could do it in D&D, DCC, Castles and Crusades, whatever it happened you're doing. If you have a fantasy world that you know pretty well, you can do a pretty good clone of it without too much effort if you have a system, a game system in place, an RPG system, But like, I'd rather see someone like go beyond and be like, hey, I just watched all of the Untouchable movies. You know what I
Nice.
mean?
Yeah.
Crime in the Streets, whatever, and then like, I want to apply that to my fantasy. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, what would that look like? Or, weird stuff, sci-fi stuff, whatever it happens to be. But like, I think trying to, I think it's always a good thing you can do. Take your time with it. You know what I mean? Like, this is the thing about design is like ideas are a dime a dozen. You will have more ideas, So I would say, really, if you want to get into it because you won't be happy any other way, and that's the only reason why you should get into professional game design, then I think take your time and really figure out what would be whatever you do, it has to be your passion. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, you can write for somebody else and be like, that's cool. Like, you can spend 2 months, 3 months, 6 months on a thing that is somebody else's and get into that headspace. But if you were to create a new thing that is going to be your new thing, I would say take all the time, groove into it. You know what I mean? And then just mess around with it. Spend a lot of time in your notebook or typing or even just in your daydreaming. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Really going over, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it play like? Once you have it in play, you write it, and then you cannot play test enough. That is advice that will still be true in 5 years as it is from now. There's no amount of play testing that is too much. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
There's definitely amount of play testing that is not enough. I mean, just as much, take your stuff out for a spin absolutely as much as you can. I think, get out there and just do it, write, like write an adventure, run it a lot of times and make changes and like really pay attention to how your actual adventures go. And don't be like, sometimes you have to do the sad thing where it's like, at some point you will write an amazing room and you'll go, oh, it's screwing up the whole rest of the adventure. I got to cut this out.
Yeah.
Here's what you do. You create a folder. So let's say your adventure is called Blue Screen, okay? Because you got a blue screen in the background. Blue Screen version 1 is your main thing. You create a new folder that is called Cut from Blue Screen, and you take that bit out and you put it over there. And maybe at some point in the future, that's the lie you can tell to yourself. I'll save this wonderful room over here, and then you don't feel bad about it. And maybe I'll come back to it one day.
Then you just have this, at least you have this awesome repository of ideas, doing it that way.
Exactly. And you got to get those ideas out in order to get the next idea. So don't feel bad about writing something awesome and then not using it and then coming up with the next thing. That's the most natural and the most important thing in the mind of a creative that you can do, I think.
Cool. That's some great advice, I think. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, like really, like you were saying with playtesting, that's when you want to break it. Of like work out all those kinks so that you're not at like Gen Con running this for a group of 10 and all of a sudden, oh, geez, this doesn't work.
I was in an adventure I was part of a tournament thing that I was helping run. And there was one very complicated scenario that the GM and the designer, God love him, didn't realize that every wizard worth his salt was going to fix with Wizard Hand.
Oh boy.
And everyone did it. Everyone finished that dungeon, I'm gonna say half hour early or so.
Oh wow. Oh, it's kind of a stinker, but
it is kind of a stinker.
Yeah.
And I don't, I mean, I can't like, and since every table figured that out, at least the ones that I ran with and heard about later, there's no way he ran that enough times. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Somebody should have
on that.
Someone should have figured that out. And It should have been a thing.
Oh, geez, that's too bad. So,
No, everyone makes mistakes. It happens.
yeah, they're inevitable. So hopefully they didn't beat themselves up too bad over
I know, right?
it. So if there were, I've got a couple more questions, and then I can let you get back to your evening. Um, if someone were afraid to submit a pitch, what would you say to them? Like if they're
I would,
sitting on a pitch and they're like, they're going to think
sure.
this is stupid.
No, you know what? A pitch is for free. You know what I'm saying? Like you should never feel about don't feel bad about that. And even if it is dumb, get it out. Like, the best thing you can do is, send that to somebody who's then going to go, oh, this is garbage. I mean, total dog crap. But this part is good. So you held up Hole in the Sky earlier. Okay.
Yep.
If I'm lying, I'm dying. I pitched an adventure to Joseph Goodman and said, here, this is going to be my first ever DCC adventure. What do you think? He ripped it to shreds. He was like, nope, nope, nope. But this little bit over here, that's pretty cool. So take that bit, and I'm talking about 3%,
Wow.
and expand that and try, and just make that into a thing. We went through that, I'm going to say 4 times until the final version of Hole in the Sky came out. You know what I'm saying?
And
That's a fun. Yeah.
And it did come out. That's the
And it
beauty
came
of it.
out, and it's I'm still, and I still love playing it. And the original version probably wouldn't, it would have been forgettable, like it's eminently forgettable. Probably would have been fun to work on and probably fun to run sometimes, but not the kind of thing that like would stick in your head. So I would say, yeah, get those pitches out. The worst thing that they can tell you is that I'm not interested. But whenever you can, get that advice from somebody who's going to go, let's see, don't be afraid to say, okay, what was wrong with this? Was it any part of it right? Like
Right.
obviously you can't get that with every publisher concern, but when you can, it's good. But get it out. Everyone comes up with crazy ideas that aren't going to amount to anything. But the very act of getting that out there and putting it out there is going to free up a part of your brain that can then, becomes a fertile field that then new ideas can then spring from. It's totally true. So yeah, pitch those things, man. Don't stress that. Don't be afraid to pitch your stuff, and don't be afraid to come up with outlandish pitches. I mean, go big.
I say the more outlandish, the better.
Obviously, depends on what you're working on in the system. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? There are some things that require a degree of like subtlety or even genre specification. You know what I'm saying? You can't be like, I want to do it's a Victorian thing for a Victorian game for a Victoriana audience, except it's going to have all chainsaw fights. Every fight's a chainsaw fight. I don't know why. Like someone's going to love that, but not everybody.
Right. Oh boy. So speaking of pitches, how I've talked to you, we kind of talked about this a little bit before going on the air. How in depth should the initial pitch be going into Goodman Games?
I would say if you were doing a pitch to Goodman Games specifically for a third party thing that you wanted to do using the DCC system, I would say don't make it more than 1,000 words at the absolute outside. It should not. That's a very very long pitch. You should outline what you should have a title. You should have the basic outline of what you're going to do. I would have a couple of, if it's an adventure, I would pitch it. Talk about a couple of monsters that you're going to have inside there. If you were going to have any bits that are controversial and what you mean by controversial, I would list those. And I would also let them know how you saw it, like eventually, this is going to be a 20-page book that will be, whatever, or this will be a PDF that with maps and art that'll be as long as I want for it to. You should have some idea of what the final, product should look like. Obviously, circumstances have it and that could change, but you should have the physical reality of what it is that you're doing really matters. Now, obviously, we live in the age of the PDF, and you could do it's nothing to do, 144-page PDF, 10 pages of which is channels just where, you roll up all of the varieties of your cats. I would play that game.
Yeah,
my cat is sleepy and floppy, but jealous or whatever. I don't know. But have an idea of how long you want it to be. But the best pitch is going to be snappy and fast, and it'll be, it should give somebody, it should get somebody excited from the get go. You know what I mean? Like, and the briefer that you can tell your idea is, here's the thing: if you have a really good idea of what you have, you should be able to put it to somebody in 2 or 3 sentences. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Obviously, that doesn't tell everything. You can't tell everything. It's a pitch. You know what I'm saying? Everything would be a book or an adventure or whatever it happens to be that you're doing. But
Gotcha.
I would keep it brief. Use good language. I mean, even a pitch. Do this. Somebody who edits. I would even get your pitch edited. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
There's
that's a great
nothing
idea.
like if I get an idea from someone that's just full of terrible spelling mistakes and no punctuation, like my confidence is not that you can finish a thing and that it would look like a book or whatever you're
Right,
trying to make. You know what I
right.
mean? I'm not thinking, oh God,
If
guys.
you get a
You know,
giant run-on sentence from somebody, then it's
yeah,
like,
exactly. And some things like, again, ideas, everyone has ideas. There are always ideas out there. It's, but execution is what gets it done. You know what
yep,
I'm saying? So, you know, um, like show them that you can execute. Show them that you can execute a good pitch.
excellent advice. Um, so I have one last quick question about your creative process. Uh, what do you always come up? What comes first, like the title, a hook, or location for you, or is it always something different every time?
It's something different a lot of the times. Sometimes I'll have a title and I'll work backwards from that. Like that'll hit me first. Very often, I'm very visual, and I will very often visualize a thing I want to see happen.
Yes.
Inside of a crazy adventure. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? Um, so for me, it happens that way, but it happens differently all the time, and that can be a character name, a character by themselves can spring a thing off, or dialogue, or a really cool monster that I think would be a neat thing to have to fight. That I start thinking about, and then it's like, oh, where would you encounter this thing? What's he doing there? What's it want? What's it trying to do? You know. Um, so I mean, there's no one way for me. You know what I mean? And it's funny these days, like titles are really important. You know what I mean? In the old days, I don't know. In modern times, you are more likely to have to work a title very hard. You might
Right.
have a great idea for a title. Google that. You know what I mean? Has somebody else used it or something very similar? Maybe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of role playing games, board games, video games, TVs, movies, comics. I mean, you're up against manga. You know what I mean? So, but sometimes you get that classic title, and then and that can be a good starting off point. But don't limit yourself. Don't think I have to think of a title first, or I have to think of a character first. Let it come to you. You know what I mean? Whatever in whatever form it comes. The kernel of the idea of XCrawl for me. I was on the bus, and I was literally had this vision of a warrior with a shield, and on the back of his shield, he had a digital clock stuck to it. And he was looking at it and looking at the thief who's trying to pick a lock. And he's like, we are going to get disqualified if you don't hurry up. He's like, I'm doing the best I can over here. I'm like, all of XCrawl began with that one little visual thing. And I created the whole game
Off that.
to, yeah, to create a world where I could see that happen. You know,
Well, I am excited to play in that world.
I can't wait to have you, cousin.
I
We're going to have
can't,
some good
I know.
times.
Well, that is all I have, my friend. And thank you
Cool.
again so much for coming on.
You are
I
very
know you've
welcome.
got some stuff to do, and I want to let
Like,
you.
is it lay on the couch and feel sorry for myself? Because yes,
Well,
that's how I picture the rest of my evening going.
I was
Thank you
trying
very
I was
much.
trying not to say anything like that. And
I
yeah.
might eat some yogurt too, but it's gonna a lot of feeling sorry for myself, a lot of laying on the couch. But this was great fun. It was a wonderful distraction from feeling like garbage. So thank you very much for having me on the show again.
Thank you. And folks out there.